vast majority of them spoke on behalf of the standards. But let me tell you who some of those organizations were. It was representatives from the military. There was a rear admiral who represented 400 admirals and generals. I have personally met with the student organization, the children of military families, and heard the horror stories of what happens when they have to transfer. The very men and women who are protecting our rights to be in this room having this discussion, those are the children who suffer the most if we're all over the board. So they're not perfect, but they're very good. Had lunch today with a school board member, small district, 3,000 students. He said, if you change the standards, it will cost our district $500,000 in staff development and everything that we'll have to do. Our districts can't afford it. It's not best for teachers, kids.
Thank you. Well, I'm quite sure teachers don't want to flip-flop again because they have faced that, and so I'm sympathetic to that. But Common Core is just a bad idea. It's centralization. I'm waiting to hear, well, if you like your history, you can keep your history. When's that going to happen? And that's a problem. I mean, we've heard that kind of rhetoric before, and this comes from the same bureaucrats that in 2002, if we're also open, you might be surprised to learn that in 2002, the same people passed a social studies curriculum for K through 5 that does not mention the Bill of Rights until 4th grade, but yet in 3rd grade talks about the 9 important people who expanded rights. Keep in mind, we haven't talked about what rights are. You can look this up on GPS on the DOE's website. Those 9 important people include not one Republican, but they do include LBJ and FDR and Cesar Chavez. That's what our children are learning right now. It's social theory, social movement theory, and it's a problem. So forgive me if I'm not real keen on what the bureaucrats are trying to sell us here. I call these programs sometimes the Full Employment and Funding Act for bureaucrats, textbook companies, and testing companies. It is a fallacy that we need, that we need this to be standardized. We can tell, we need to get out of the criterion reference test business and get into the criterion normed test business, because you could take an Iowa right now, have decades of data on that, and know where your kid is relative to kids across the nation. So that's the kind of thing we need to get into. And we shouldn't be making policy on a small group. I'm a military brat. My father was a Green Beret in Vietnam. We moved. I was born in Fort Devens, Massachusetts. But I'm telling you, that's not the majority. And to make that as an excuse for the reason we should have this isn't good. And I will tell you that now fully 17 states have either pulled out or about to pull out or never went into the Common Core Park assessment.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, in 2010, I was one of the Republican candidates, and one part of my platform at that point was I was against Race to the Top. I was against the Common Core. One of the things I think we have to understand to start off with, that we as in Georgia, is that if we're going to improve education, we have to control education. And that means that, first of all, we need to follow the Constitution. Education is not a enumerated power given in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It is something that is very specific in Article 8 of our Georgia Constitution, which basically gives, really control at the local level. So I think, we need to begin at that point just to follow the Constitution. It's amazing what happens when you follow the rule of law and the way things that were set up with our founding fathers. The standards themselves, again, to be able to address everything, we need to make sure that we own the copyright. We need to make sure that we own everything about what goes on in Georgia education as far as our standards are concerned. Because each child is different. As I said before, we need to personalize education and not standardize education. So by doing so, and controlling education, and again rejecting, the notion that this is a blanket, we need to go back, look at the standards, look at everything thoroughly. We need to also do a better job of implementation. Now, you've heard there are a lot of teachers who are for or perhaps with this, but one of the very critical things we've looked at is that implementation has been horrible. It was horrible under No Child Left Behind. So we are chasing down the same road that we are just came out of. So I think if history, if we do not pay attention, we will repeat it. Well, I can let you know for certain that as an individual who implemented No Child Left Behind, who has seen what we are doing here with Race to the Top, we are repeating history all over. And it will not serve our education, it will not serve our kids, it will not serve our teachers. So, let's look at this, make sure that whatever we adopt is sound. We could have done better, but we chose not to. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Common Core for about 2 years, and I have the answer. I could tell you for a long time about the problem and why we have that problem, but I have the answer, and I'm about to tell you the answer at the end of what I'm going to say. But first of all, to all the military people out there, Common Core is different in Georgia than it is in all the other states except for Utah, because Georgia's State Department of Education decided to adopt integrated Common Core, where we have coordinate geometry, coordinate algebra, and analytic geometry. All the other states that have Common Core have traditional Common Core, where they have Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry. So it doesn't even apply, that whole thing about everyone being able to pick up so easily. That doesn't apply to Georgia or Utah. I have the answer to the battle over standards, because the reason why we're having these problems, we've never had these battles before. Why do we have them now? It's because our standards are so grade specific. Not only that, they are tied to specific tests. So when you talk about criterion normed, I'm not for criterion normed tests. What I'm for are tests that will test a whole range of grade bands so that teachers can be free to meet the needs of their students. The way it's set up now is not working. I can fix all of that. All of these debates over standards will go away because we will fix the testing system. We can meet the requirements of No Child Left Behind without having to take this race to the top money. We went from the frying pan to the fire when we did that. That needs to be undone, and we need to get our educational system back so teachers can meet the needs of their students.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, we'll start with Fitz. The next question is, what do you see as Georgia's #1 educational challenge?
I would have to say graduation rates. And getting our youth, getting our youngsters graduated, not only graduated, but graduated so that they are work ready, if not work ready, or along with work ready, or they can go to technical school or to a 4-year college. You know, with 1,700 employees, one of the most critical needs for skilled labor in my company. And what we need to make sure our students, when they're graduated, that they are ready to go to work. Not just hard skills, but soft skills. Look you in the eye. Understand I have to be here at 8. Lunch is for an hour. I get off work at 4:30. I'm responsible for my actions. They also have to be educated and ready to get to work. And if they want to go to a tech school, we ought to understand that that tech school play a very important part in our education model. Students need to go, if they want to be a computer analyst, but they don't think they want to go to college, or if they want to be a welder, or they want to be a plumber, or they need to be an electrician, all of those jobs need to be trained and ready to go. If they want to go on to a 4-year university, great. I think that's wonderful as well. But we've got to understand, you've got to make sure that as we bring them up through the ranks and we get them graduated, keep their interest. When you keep a child's interest, you keep a child in school. We want to make sure that we keep their interest, so we keep them in school and we get them graduated. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Well, budget cuts have come up recently because of the economic recession. But right prior to that, we actually had an economic boom. A lot of people were moving here, and we had more money than we'd had before. The way to keep people moving here, and it goes along with what Fitz was saying, is that I've been to Chamber of Commerce meetings before where employers are looking for 2 things if they want to move their business to Georgia. And by moving their business in, there's more tax revenue from that business, and there's more taxes from the families that they bring here. But those businesses want to know, does Georgia provide them an educated workforce? And sometimes an educated workforce just means, are these people fluent in English? And so that's one of the things that I want to talk about. The second thing is if they come, they want to know if the schools are good enough for their children. Will they still get into the same college they would have gotten into if they hadn't moved to Georgia, or get the same training for possible jobs? And so if we don't provide those 2 things to the businesses that want to come in here for economic development, we won't have a tax base to draw from to fund these mandates. And back to English. I feel strongly on this because I've had some in-classroom experience with this, that you're familiar with English as a second language class. And just like one size doesn't fit all for all of us, for our children, it doesn't fit the same for people who don't speak English. In one little group of 3, I had a girl that was fluent in in English, but she never raised her hand because she was shy, so the teachers assumed she didn't know English. But the other 2 little boys couldn't understand me forever. In ESOL, you only speak in English. When they couldn't understand me, I finally switched to Spanish. They still didn't know the answers to the questions, even though I spoke their language. Finally, I said, "What grade were you in school in Mexico?" And they said, "We've never been in school before today." They were in the 6th grade. My heart goes out to those kids. If we want an educated workforce, if we want people that are going to be taxpayers and self-sufficient, we need to educate all children. And that was not done during Leave No Child Behind. They were put out as a subgroup.
Thank you. Helen?
Thank you. I want to go one step further on Mr. Johnson's things that I agree with about graduation rate, but too often we look at the graduation rate on the backside when it happens in May of that graduation year. What we have to look at is to make sure that kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, that every child is prepared for the next grade. Because when we get to their senior year, we don't have to worry about whether they're going to graduate or not, because they are prepared to graduate when they enter as a senior. Not we're worried about it in April of their senior year if they've passed the end of course test, or they've not passed this test, or they're on the border of passing this required subject. That we need to make sure that in our K through 12 system, because sometimes we treat or we speak just on the backside as a 12th grader. Well, if we would talk about our kindergarten students who are going to be in their prime earning wage life in 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, we better be very concerned about our kindergartners and our 1st graders and our 3rd graders all the way up, and not just worry about their senior year and their graduation rate, but we worry about every child in every grade to make sure that when they finish the 1st grade, they are, we talk about ready for life, we better make sure they're ready for 2nd grade, and then they're ready for 3rd grade, and ready for 4th grade. And then when they get to high school, they'll be just fine, and we don't have to worry about graduation rate. Why? Because we took care of them K through 11. And that's where we need to get to. We need to test a lot less to make sure they're taught what they need to be taught and not taught towards test. That we need to teach what we need to know in Georgia for our kids to be great, and we need to worry about the whole child every grade.
Thank you, and I'll concur that the grad rate is problematic for us. Young people that do not graduate high school just have far worse outcomes overall. We have got to put things in place to assist these young people. I'll tell you there are 2 issues that contribute to the issue of lack of graduation, and we've got to be cognizant of it, and we've got to do something about it. I've always said that I create or eliminate 90% of my headaches with who I hire. We have got to work on setting up a system where we continue to attract the best and brightest to our field, that we don't treat our educators as second-class citizens, that we give them the support that they need. Because the single most important variable, once that child hits the classroom door, on how successful they're going to be, how far they're going to move, is the skill set of that classroom teacher. We want the best and brightest to come into the field, and quite frankly, with what's happened to our educators, it's not as appealing as it once was, even though the educators I know are absolutely passionate about their young people. The second part that we're talking about with a poor graduation rate is apathy, or students who do not see the relevance of what they are doing. We have got to help them find their passion. Our Pathways initiative that allows young people to have real-world experiences where they mentor with people in the world of work. These are the things that will help us help the young people find their passion. We don't lose young people because of a lack of aptitude. We lose the young people because they don't see the relevance of what they're doing. We have got to help them find that relevance so they'll stick with us and continue throughout the educational system. That will help us, and we've got to treat our teachers with more respect.
Thank thank you. I see some folks up here have been reading my blog. I'm so proud of that. The Department of Education isn't doing their job. That's the problem. That's the first letter in focus is for financial accountability and integrity. I'm going to give you two numbers, 0 and 20. 0, that's the number of financial accountability markers the state of Georgia has disclosure on for a public district. 20, that's the number of disclosures in the state of Texas. They have a system called the Financial Integrity Reporting System of Texas, the first system. It is no accident that they spend less per pupil and get an 87% graduation rate. And if you look right here, you can see where the jobs are going. We're in the negative column, folks. They're a big positive. They're our competition. Tennessee's our competition. Tennessee has an 86% graduation rate. We're at 71%. That is atrocious. And both of those states spend less per pupil than we do. So if we do care about teachers, and we all care about teachers, let me tell you why they're victims of this. They're victims because the bureaucracy has accrued all the benefit of the funding formula. Okay, we have seen epic bloat in bureaucracy. From 1992 through 2009, we had a 41% increase in student enrollment. During the same time, we had a 74% increase in administrators at the central office, not principals, at the central office and non-teaching staff. Had we held the growth rate of administrators to the growth rate of enrollment, every teacher could have $8,000 more in that pocket, in their back pocket right now. And that is why our graduation rate is low. We're not watching how we're spending our dollars. They're accruing to bureaucracy and not to teachers, not to the classroom, because we're not investing there. It's not rocket science, folks. Other states are lapping us because they are driving money into the classroom. Texas also has a thing called FAST, the Financial Allocation Study of Texas, and they measure the efficacy of every dollar. We need to do the same. Thank you.
Again, this is a very easy question for, an educator and somebody that has seen our kids, at the high school level as a social studies teacher, but also work with them at the elementary and pre-K level. It's literacy. If we can teach our kids to read, we will open up the doors of opportunity. And that's what we need to really focus on. For myself as a high school teacher, when it came time to test, my kids knew facts. They knew figures. That was never the issue. It was their ability to read and comprehend. And lo and behold, you think about all the tests we give in education, whether it's math, science, social studies, whatever, guess what you have to do? You have to be able to read. And so that's where we have to address the problem. If we are going to improve education, we have to make sure that our kids are literate. One of the things I've looked at that within some law enforcement agencies, they look at the literacy level or the literate level at 3rd grade. At that point, they begin to determine how many beds they're going to need in their correction facilities. Georgia right now, I think according to the first, foundations, FVRST, we graduate and have an average literacy level at about 8 or grade 8.5. So we need improvement there. That's something we have. My wife, who is a reading recovery teacher, says, Richard, the best thing that parents can do is, again, take a book and read 5 minutes a night. And so that's why I've committed that even before we get into pre-K, that we reach out to nonprofit groups such as the First Foundation, such as Dr. Ben Carson's, fund as well, our Lions Club, our Rotary Club. Let's put books in the hands of our kids, prior to getting into education. If our parents will sit down and read, we will increase their vocabulary, we'll increase their sentence structure, we will make a difference. That is where we attack it. We address it at the root, and again, we do it by addressing the needs of the kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mary Kay.
So, as a math education professor, I teach classes in problem solving. So, the first problem that I'm going to solve is we're going to get rid of this whole discussion over standards, and then we're going to get all our financial house in order. But even if we solve the Common Core crisis and we have our financial house in order, there's something that we need across the state of Georgia. And I began teaching 25 years ago in Miami-Dade in an all-minority school, in a huge classroom. It had 3 different 5th grade classes and no walls. What were they thinking? I still think, what were they thinking sometimes with the decisions that are made? But what I did before I ran for school board, and I've been serving on the Fayette County School Board, even though I'm an education professor with 9 years in the classroom and 17 years in higher ed, I substituted at the high schools in our county. 4 out of the 5 high schools. I substituted at the middle school. I substituted at the elementary school. Nobody knew I was Dr. Mary Kay Bacayao. There's a whole, it's big. The problems we have in Georgia are big. There's a lack of respect for teachers from the students. The students have a lack of respect for each other many times. And so many of these initiatives that are coming down and all of these new problems that we have with all these standards, they're causing our students not to respect our teachers even more. Because the teachers are doing things they don't necessarily agree with, they're being forced to do. So the biggest problem, I think, after all those other problems are solved, is having our students have respect for each other, have respect for their teachers, and of course respect for parental involvement. Now the students that I met at the college level, they said that, you know, they weren't prepared for college because they weren't learning anything. And that's one thing that is big. I don't know if I can solve that, but I can solve the other things.
Thank you. Kira?
2.5 years ago, Georgia signed on, well, it was before that, but 2.5 years ago, Georgia changed its graduation rate. And if you all remember, we went from 87.5% to 68%, right? So we all signed on with every other state to come up with a graduation formula that was in line with other states, yes? I don't think our problem is the graduation rate. I think the problem is that when you look at the highest state that graduates students, that's Iowa with an 87% graduation rate, their numeric passing score is a 60. So you look to Florida, their numeric passing score is a 63. New Hampshire, 60. Wisconsin, 63. Those are our top 3 states, and then Florida is our neighbor. Alabama is also a 60. So when we talk about graduation rates, if we aligned ourselves again with the other states as we have with our graduation rates, then we would see an immediate and valid jump in graduation rates. We would also see an immediate and valid drop in cost per pupil expenditures because our students are coming after they're failing these classes and taking them again on the taxpayer dime. And that's part of public education. So if we went ahead and aligned ourselves with the grading scales of the other states, then we would have, graduation rate wouldn't be a problem. The biggest challenge in education for me, for my students, that I see is affording our kids the freedom to choose. They need to be able to follow their passions. They need to be able to follow their promise. We need to allow our children to walk with their feet. I am very happy with my local public school. My daughter is happy there. We love what they're doing. It may not work for my son, and I want to be able, as a parent, to be able to allow my son or my daughter to move without having any headaches, without having any strife, and without having any issues that might come up. So the biggest challenge facing us is school choice.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Cheryl. What will you do to organize the Department of Education to deliver staff development more effectively to teachers?
My background is that I worked for a large corporation. It was Monsanto Chemical Company, which my son loves to tell me is the most evil company, which shows that I can rise to a challenge because I was their public relations director in the past when people had a good view of the company. But I had many jobs in that company, and one of them was staff development inside the firm. And so I have a background in that, working with employees. I also worked for John Portman. He's an architect that built most of downtown Atlanta, and I was his PR director for the merchandise mart. So we had to deal in large-scale numbers of employees, send our news releases out in 25 languages. So working with employees and motivating them, that just comes with the background I've been involved with.
Thank you. Alan?
What I would like to do for staff development is every teacher needs it all the time. My wife is a teacher, and she craves staff development because she wants to learn how to do better each and every day. She's a really good teacher. If I was half as good a superintendent as she was a teacher, I'd be pretty darn good. But she craves knowledge. She wants to learn, she wants to know how to teach her kids better. She wants to know how other places teach. And so I would use our regional educational service agencies, which are located throughout the state, because it's convenient for the teachers to go there. It is convenient for the people in the DOE to go to those different places all over the state of Georgia, so they can have appropriate small training. You don't have to take them to Atlanta. You don't have these big 400 delegate meetings that you have where you go to these little mini sessions where you're cramped and you don't learn much. But you go to these regional education service agencies and you have people that can teach 1 on 10 about second grade math. You can teach teachers about 1 on 10 about Georgia history. You can teach the teachers one-on-one to have local staff development that is relevant to their school, that is relevant to their students, and that actually costs you nothing because the Reeses are already there, their staff development people are already there, and the state people can drive there and impart their knowledge and wisdom. And this type of staff development that is more hands-on, one-on-one, costs the state of Georgia nothing, and we learn something new every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Alan. And professional learning is absolutely critical. In my experience, student achievement tends to trail professional learning. You've got to have high-quality professional learning, and you will see. If you focus on it, you'll see the needle start moving in professional learning. You talk about how are we going to do that. First thing we have to give our teachers is the time to do so. 2/3 of the districts in our state are operating on less than 180 days that are required by state law because of the funding issues. The professional learning days were the first to go. We don't have the time, so we've got to find a way to provide our teachers the time. How do you do that? Well, we've got to use the RESAs, the Regional Educational Service Agencies. They are our best friend. They've got talent. They are close to the local districts, and they can help get the professional learning out there. So we have to support them, and we've got to have a symbiotic, hand-in-glove relationship where we are working together to help our teachers do a better job teaching. We've got to use the talent that we have in the state of Georgia in our teaching corps. There's plenty of talent out there. We can utilize the best practices across the state. We can archive those lessons. We can use GPB, and we have, to archive the lessons so that third grade teachers can view it on their own time. The administrators can say, hey, let's look at questioning technique, for example. Those teachers can get together at their own convenience, look at the lesson, and then get together and talk about it. But we've got to utilize webinars. We've got to use archive professional learning activities, and we've got to use the talent we've got across the state in the teaching profession through the RESAs. Because teachers learn best from teachers, and they believe it when teachers are sharing the successes that they've got. We've got to get best practices from across the state and make them available to all of our teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first, I think you listen to teachers and you ask them what it is their needs are, what they feel, their training, and that probably will ebb and flow depending on where they are in their career and what location, if they've moved from a metro to a rural area, or changes like that. So we need to listen to our teachers. But we've got to measure the efficacy of training. And I mentioned earlier that Texas has a system, the financial allocation system of Texas, and they measure these things. For every dollar spent, they get a measurement on the return on investment financially for the taxpayer and an increase in achievement. So we want to make sure the taxpayers of Georgia are paying for training that is driving student achievement up. We want to make sure that it's we're being frugal with that it's not lots of money and little achievement gains. So we need to listen to teachers, see what they need, and then we've got to measure the different programs. And then we can share that other states are doing better than us on this because they're measuring their results. And we need to work with our regents who are overseeing the colleges in our state, because that is, they're producing teachers, and we need to know when they graduate, are they effective from day one? And if not, why are they not as effective as they are from, say, Vanderbilt? What's going on there? We need to understand that and work with the state system. I spoke with a regent the other day about that issue. So there's a lot of study to be done there. We just can't say, just have platitudes. Well, we want to just, teachers learn better from teachers. And so we need to actually check that out. We need to verify that. We have to determine if it actually works. And that you're getting return on investment. Otherwise, we're wasting your money. It's your money. So we've got to take a look at systems that do track that, and that's the kind of accountability I want to bring to Georgia.
Again, as an individual who was in charge of staff development, I can, and has seen some of the things that's coming out of DOE, I can assure you that most of the stuff that I've seen, if you suffer from insomnia, it's a good cure. Because, one of the things we look at it as far as education is concerned, for a teacher, it has to be purposeful, it has to be meaningful, it has to be sensible. It has to be relevant as far as what we use. And so many times in education, what we find out is that, it's highly faddish. Today's, fad is yesterday's news. And so we have to make sure that when we are planning for, staff development, that it's long-term. It is something that it will actually have relevance, as far as improving our education, improving the craft that we have. And part of the problem that we have up there is that, you kind of go back to marketing. Anytime you have a delivery system, you make sure that, that it's proven and tested. You field test it before you actually send it out to the customer base. And there's a reason, why businesses do that. So that they can show relevance, so they can make sure that it's meaningful, that it is sensible. So I think that when we look at staff development, yes, we have lots of delivery systems, but, as a teacher, if it doesn't meet a need, if it's something where I'm just going to sit for hours and hours and just be completely bored and waste my time, then, we don't need it. And there's a lot of that out there. So we need to make sure whatever we offer has been proven, it has been tested, and again, has been seen by the people that are actually going to use it. Let's have some marketing up front. Let's make sure that it is sound. Make sure that it does not put us to sleep while we're sitting there watching it. So, we can do some things, add some business to it, make it smarter, make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Cherokee?
I've done staff development, teacher professional development, and teachers are a tough group because they're teachers and they know what they're doing in the classroom and they want something out of it and they want to come and be able to share their ideas too. So I've done professional development for RISAs. I've flown out to different states to do professional development for teachers who are in trouble because they haven't met AYP, in Newark, in New York, and work with school districts in Florida and Alabama. And in all my experience in all this professional development, and in higher ed, teaching people who are going to be teachers, teaching people who are in the classroom, I have met so many wonderful teachers. What I would do if I were in charge of professional development would be completely different from what I've been doing. What I would do is I would get those teachers who are expert teachers, who are out there every day teaching with the material, and have them present what they're doing. That's what I would do.